A pastor's wife called a veterinarian who makes house calls and told him her dog was very sick and wouldn't move. When the vet arrived, he found the dog on the floor with his feet in the air. He examined the dog, but there was no response. He reached into his bag and pulled out a live cat. He moved the cat over the dog several times and then put the cat back in the bag. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your dog is dead," the vet said. "That'll be $430. $430 for what?" the woman asked. "The fee is $30 for the house call and $400 for the CAT scan," the vet replied.
That was going to be something like the cat's in the bag.
I could have brought the cat inside and used it as a demonstration. Alright, so tonight we're looking at Joseph and the temptation he experienced in the book of Genesis. So clearly we're not talking about the Joseph of New Testament. Temptation is something we face all the time, and for honest, is one of the biggest battles that we face. But Joseph stands up to the temptation that's thrown his way and is faithful towards God, and God is faithful towards him. I kind of hope the study of the Old Testament is just refreshing, because it's the stories that you've heard as kids, that are taught during Sunday school and VBS and stuff. But instead of just kind of looking at the surface layer, we've been able to kind of dig into it and seeing what else the story has for us. So have you ever been scared?
Yes.
I was worried there for a minute, never been scared?
Never.
We watch videos all the time about people being pranked and scared and stuff, and this right here is one of my favorites. It's being really slow at playing videos today.
Is it the one where the guy punches through the computer? Oh. That one's very popular.
Great. One day we're going to prank Nathan. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill his room with balloons.
Find your name.
Did you know one of the big phone books, if you rip it up, it'll fill a card. If you rip them one by one.
They just talk to their calmly after a while. Oh! Oh gosh. There goes that. He's down. I was waiting for someone to be taking a picture.
I like the one where he gets the players. You see all these huge men screaming like little girls.
We'll watch it next week.
They got a snowman
All right.
guy.
Next week, whatever.
When I'm in here.
Alright, so what are some things that you are afraid of?
Snakes. Oh, I think that's what he said.
Snakes. The
Grasshoppers.
doctor.
I thought you guys.
Doctor?
I thought you were going to say dogs. I'm afraid of cats.
Grasshoppers.
Grasshoppers. So people are afraid of some crazy things. The first one, and I'm not going to try to say these things, but is the fear of being tickled by these feathers. I don't know if this would even tickle you because it's fake, but now this one is something that Robin's afraid of. Not this one, but the next one.
What was it?
A fear of clowns. Anything that wears this little thingy.
Not anything. If you put it on, I'm not going to be scared. But if they're all painted up,
Can I tell a story?
Sure.
Okay, So Robin has her little child first like Bible
My
deal,
first Bible thing.
and
That's
the
all
like
pictures and stuff.
back at it's like the very back has a picture of a clown. It's
It's
talking
saying
about
like God loves everyone, even tall people, and it has a picture of a clown.
and she took like a pencil and like scribbled over this like.
When I was like a baby, not like recently. Apparently, I did that.
It was yesterday.
No, I didn't even know it. I brought that whenever we moved in together. You know, whenever we got married and I moved in, I brought that. We were like flipping through it, and I like scribbled out the clown's face.
So what if the clown hadn't been scribbled out?
All right. So the next one is fear of laughter. Then a fear of bald people.
Sorry, those two people for you.
A fear of school.
That would make sense. Of course, it's the longest one.
A fear of washing or bathing.
Ooh.
Now this one. College is a great thing to get stories from. Okay. So there was a guy that lived across the hall from me and my roommate, and all of a sudden, like halfway through the semester, decides that he wants to stop bathing and he wants to stop washing his clothing, but he wants to start smoking.
Oh.
So I mean, he smelled. His roommate moved out,
That poor roommate.
and then just kept stinking. And so finally, my roommate bought us a Scentsy, which is not allowed in the dorm room, but trying to make our room smell better. And then would like take a Febreze bottle because this guy would leave his door open,
Oh.
Was he
but not
smoking
be in
the
there.
room?
No,
Oh, okay.
but I mean,
Yeah,
he hasn't
I do.
showered or washed his clothes in months, and would take like Febreze bottles and like go through his room and like Febreze room.
Poor people.
But it was like the worst.
Did he have a reason, or did he just say it?
I don't know. Just automatically, just kind of started.
I'm
Like,
gonna say
oh,
this
I'm not living with
time.
mommy and daddy anymore. I'm gonna stop washing my clothes and taking a shower. And then the last one is fear of everything.
Are you afraid of everything?
I don't know. So these are pretty ridiculous, but we all have some fears that we face too. We all have struggled. Okay, so we have struggled or are struggling with pain over something. We do not just let struggles with pain and fear, but temptations too. We're going to walk through Joseph's life and see how his pains and fears led to a moment of temptation for him and see how it became the tipping point of his life. Tell the cat to be quiet. Alright, so Abraham's promised offspring were alive and well in the promised land of Canaan. So they've gone to the promised land, which Joshua led them into. And Abraham's grandson, Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel. After he wrestled with God, God's name changed to Israel. Had 12 sons, and they became the 12 tribes of Israel, the nations of Israel. But they do not like the favorite son, who is Joseph. So they see him, they sell him into slavery in Egypt. And this was roughly 1800 BC. So if you relate this to our lesson last week, it's about 200 years after Job and after Abraham. And so, with my dad being a pastor, one of the churches we lived in, we didn't live in the church, but one of the churches he worked at, we had children's choir. And so we did plays and stuff, and one of the plays we did was Joseph, the Coat of Many Colors. Except for, we didn't actually do the play part, but I was Joseph. And one of the songs was me doing a solo, pretty much telling my brothers that I was sorry to them, singing I am sorry over and over and stuff like that.
Oh.
So for the last 3 years, I've been trying to find a clip of this song and trying to find this song because I don't remember it. And I would tell you that I have a video of it, but I still haven't found it. So, but anyway, I got to be Joseph and Coat of Many Colors and all that fun stuff. But I do have a VeggieTales clip.
She is not
Esther likes VeggieTales too.
don't like listening to Nathan and not being able to see him.
Big Idea presents
The Ballad of Little Joe.
The good news is that this is a Western.
I know, Nathan, don't you?
The bad news is that our hero runs into a string of bad luck.
This does not look good.
The good news is that he never gives up hope.
Get this, Little Joe. Now we're ready for anything.
Bad things happen to good people, and a cucumber in a Stetson is going to show you why.
Crazy, huh?
Only VeggieTales can tell the story of Joseph like this.
Yippee-ki-yay-ki-yay. Today is a fresh day.
The Ballad of Little Joe, including a silly song featuring boys in the sing.
Baby needs to tell something. I don't got a big button.
It's like our favorite one.
Available on video and DVD from the studios of Big Idea.
Kids these days are like, yay, VeggieTales. I'm like, no, you don't know VeggieTales.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones.
You're not allowed to know about VeggieTales. The VeggieTales they make today are not the same as what they made.
Oh, they still make them?
Yeah, but it's
But,
more
like,
like
They make more
courage and,
moral
like,
of the
yeah.
story type thing.
they are
now.
supposed to be coming out like this year with the Noah's Ark one.
Yeah, I remember when we were little, like all it was actual Bible stories, and now it's more like.
I mean, I guess there's only so many Bible stories. Alright, so we're going to see three different things that happen to Joseph. So the first thing we're looking at is betrayal. Betrayed. So we're going to look at Genesis 37, 1 through 8. Genesis 37, 1 through 8.
What'd you say?
Genesis 37, 1 through 8.
I would hope so. That's the last one.
It's like the 16th book of the Bible.
Genesis is the first 30 what?
37. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed in the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the son of Behi and the son of Zipha, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he had made a coat of many colors for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of the other of them, they hated them. They hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to the dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the fields, when suddenly mine rose and stood upright, while yours gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? Alright, so Joseph is 17, he's a shepherd like many of the other young people in the Old Testament. And we can understand that his brothers were messing around, doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing, and Joseph did not participate with them. And in fact, instead of participating, he even tells on them. He's the tattletale. And we see that Joseph was a favorite of Jacob. And he loved him more than all the other brothers, and he even made a coat of many colors for him. And so for this reason, his brothers hated him and wanted to get rid of him. So then Joseph decides that he's going to tell his brothers about this dream, which even heightens their hatred for him even more. And then we see that he even has another dream that ends up talking about how he's going to roll over not just his brothers, but also his mom and his dad. And that makes his brothers even more angry. But yet his dad still has that love for him. He's still his favorite. So if we look at verses 12 through 17, we're going to see how his brothers respond to this. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shem. Come and I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to them, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived in Shem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're raising their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man replied. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dathan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them there. And then the story goes on to say that his brothers decide, let's kill him. We're away from our father, let's just go ahead and let's make him, get rid of him, nothing to do with him. Our father had to choose a new favorite. But there's a guy named Reuben who tries to rescue him, but he tells them, instead of killing him, how about you trade him and give it to one of these travelers that are going to Egypt. And so they sell him to him, and he becomes a slave, and he'll go to Egypt. His life was changed in a moment from being the beloved son to a slave in an unknown land of Egypt. So you see that this is where he would have lived, and then he went up here where his brothers were supposed to be, which, I mean, his brothers sound like they weren't the best people in the world. And so they were up here, and then that's where they sell him, and he travels down to Egypt. So what we see here is fear equals slavery and uncertainty. But yet the presence of God equals freedom and confidence. With God, you have that freedom and that confidence that things are going to go your way. But when you don't have, and you're living a life of fear, you're a slave to that fear. If you're living a slave to any type of sin, you're a slave to that. I cannot even imagine the emotional pain that Joseph was going through. But sometimes we go through physical pain too. Wouldn't it be nice if we could feel no pain? And that sounds amazing, but wait till you watch this video and you'll see probably your feeling about having no pain, not feeling pain will probably change after watching this video.
There are many rare diseases in the world. A 12-year-old girl, Ashlyn Blocker, suffers from an exceptionally bizarre genetic disorder and has a congenital insensitivity to pain. Simply put, she can feel absolutely no pain whatsoever. The disorder is very dangerous because the inability to feel pain means that sufferers may not recognize a potentially deadly problem as the warning signs cannot be felt. As an infant, Ashlyn never cried. Then, at 8 months, her parent took her to the doctor for an irritated eye. Medical staff noticed that she had a corneal abrasion, which should have been very painful. That visit led to multiple tests, and almost 2 years later, they received a diagnosis. To this day, Ashlyn will still sometimes stick her hand in a pot of boiling water to fish out a dropped utensil, forgetting that it will cause her skin to burn even though she won't feel it. Serving as an inspiration, Ashlyn and her family have started Camp Painless But Hopeful, a camp designated to raise awareness and help families living with congenital insensitivity to pain.
Sounds fun, huh?
So how does that work? Does she just not feel pain, or does she not feel anything at all?
Well, I mean, it looked like she felt sensation because they did the test with her blindfold and touched her finger and she moved it, so she knew which finger was touched. It's probably just the sensation. Or something in the mind, maybe?
It's just crazy to think, like, oh, that did not hurt, but yet, like, my arm is burnt. Does not sound fun. Alright, so the second thing that Joseph faced, he's going to face temptation. So let's look at Genesis 39, 2-4. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of the Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. He put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. So we see that he was a good administrator. He was a faithful servant just like he was towards his father, he also is to his master. It says that God was with them. That's the reason he prospered and was successful, and his master saw this in him. So if we go down a little bit more and look at verse 6. So when the master left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went to the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. And then what happens next is Joseph is caught because she's like, "Look, I have this in my hand. He left this with me. He tried to come on to me." So he was young and handsome. At this point, he's either between 18 and 27. Not really sure how much time has passed since he was traded to these people. And he would have been at the head of the household. No one would have known if he would have given in to the temptation. But he had his healthy fear of God. He even asked her, like, "How can I do this? How can I do such a wicked sin against God?" He tries to resist her as much as he could, but when time comes, he had to flee from the palace. Temptation comes to everyone. The question is knowing when to fight it and when to run away. So due to the false accusations of the master's wife, he was cast into prison. So what we see here is that fear equals weakness to sin and a hopelessness. But the presence of God equals power to overcome in this hope that he brought. So next thing that happens is Joseph is thrown into prison. And if we look at verses 20 through 23, Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him, and he showed him kindness and gratitude, and he granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So when the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. And the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So once again it says that God was with them in all of his trials and every situation that he faces, God was there. But one might argue, why did God not rescue him from this? Why did God let him go through this trouble? But the thing we have to understand is God's plan and God's purpose for our life are higher than what we can understand. We see the immediate and what's happening right now, but God sees the future, and the reason that we go through these trials is part of his plan. And we see that Joseph continues to be faithful. Just like we've seen with other people. We looked at Job last week and how faithful he was, even when his wife and his friends were telling him not to be faithful. Same thing happens here. Joseph's gone through all this stuff and being sold by his brothers, being thrown in prison for doing nothing, and yet he's still faithful towards God. And because of this, the Lord granted him and blessed him in his work. So he gets thrown into jail, but yet in jail, he gets put in charge of all the other prisoners. He also helped the chief butler or the cupbearer to restore his position in the Pharaoh's office. So when Joseph was brought to Pharaoh, he interpreted dreams about 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. And he suggests the way to help this is during these 7 years to store up food for the good harvest, store up the food from that so that you have it for the 7 years of famine. And he ends up winning favor in Pharaoh's eyes and becomes one of the top people in Egypt. And so his brothers come and visit him and act like, "Oh, you're our favorite. We love you, Joseph. Yet we tried to kill you." And great, thanks. Yeah, you're the best brother ever, Joseph. Yeah, great people there. Just like the friends that Job had. I mean, they were against him, and we see the same thing with Joseph with his brothers. They were so much against him, but yet God used him still. So what we see is that fear pushes us away from God. We start worshiping that thing that brings fear to us, and the unconditional love of God pushes us towards Him, and it builds that relationship with God. Fear, any other type of sin that pushes us away from God, it becomes our God. It becomes what we try to worship and or try to fight against, and so it becomes our focus instead of giving it to God and the love that God has for us. So God created Joseph with a huge purpose, just like you and me. God has incredible plans for your life, and Satan wants fear and pain and temptation to keep you from reaching the potential God has for you. But not reaching God's fullest desires for our life should be the only thing we should fear. Satan's going to throw these fears and temptations and pains in your life to try to get you off the path, just like with Job, and just like with Joseph, and just all these other stories that you see, is that Satan tries to throw them off the path, tries to throw them away from God, and yet they stay faithful towards God, and God, as a result, stays faithful to them. Just a couple of key verses that really sum up Joseph's life. The first one is the Lord was with Joseph. That's something you saw about 2 or 3 times in our reading today, is that God is with you at all times, no matter what you're facing. He's always going to be there with you to guide you through that. The second verse comes at the end of Joseph's life, and you see in Genesis 50:20 it says, "You intend to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done in saving of many lives." So God used Joseph in the story of what he had done to influence other people's life, and with the famine and storing up the food for that, it was an influence of who God was. So pain and fear of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. It talks about in the Gospels the fear that even Jesus had. But yet he trusted God, and he said, "Not my will be done, but your will be done." It was God's presence and love that carried him through and took him to the cross to lay down his life for our sins. My question for you is this: where do you run when temptation hits? When pain hits, when fear hits, where do you run? Do you run towards the temptation or away from it and towards God? This is not easy, but Joseph showed us a great example of what happens when we run away from temptation towards God. Do you let fear control your life? Because Psalms 23:4 says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Do you truly believe that God is always with you? My challenge for you is that you seek out the promises that God has for you and the purpose that God has for you in your life. And there's only one way of doing that, and that's spending time in the Word, and spending time not just praying to God about your future, but also listening to God about what He's trying to show you. And understanding that He will never give you more than you can handle. So kind of our lesson and what we should learn from the story of Joseph boils down to 4 things. First is God is with you. Second, God has a purpose for you. Third, don't let pain, fear, and temptation drive you away from God. And last, know when to fight temptation and know when to flee. Because holiness sometimes means running instead of fighting the sins. When a lot of times we feel like it should be the opposite, that we should try to fight that sin, but sometimes it's just trying to avoid it. Let's pray. Lord, as we face temptation and fear and pain in our life every day, that we'd be able to run towards you and not towards the sin, but running towards you and understanding the promise that you have for our life. And even when it seems like we're in the darkest valley of our life, that you could we could just show yourself to us, and we'd understand that you're there. I pray in your name, amen.